It didn't begin with a warning. Within hours, missiles were launched, airstrikes were carried out, and multiple countries were pulled into a rapidly escalating conflict. What started as a targeted operation quickly turned into something far bigger, spreading across regions, disrupting global routes, and raising fears of a wider war. But this didn't start overnight. The tension had been building for years, quietly, steadily, until one moment pushed it past the point of control. And now, the real question isn't just what's happening, it's how far this could go. This is Darkened Portal, where real events are often darker than fiction. If you're new here, subscribe because some stories aren't just history, they're still unfolding. In recent weeks, a conflict between Iran, the United States, and Israel has escalated rapidly, drawing global attention. What began as a series of targeted strikes has now turned into a growing crisis, one that could reshape the balance of power in the region. What's happening right now didn't start with a single strike. It's the result of years of tension, layered with distrust, strategic pressure, and a series of actions that kept pushing the situation closer to the edge. For a long time, Iran, the United States, and Israel have been locked in a quiet but constant conflict. It wasn't always visible in the form of open warfare, but it existed through covert operations, cyber attacks, proxy groups, and targeted strikes. Each side was sending signals, testing limits, responding carefully, and avoiding a full-scale confrontation. But that balance was fragile. Over the past few years, that pressure began to increase. Iran expanded its regional influence through allied groups across the Middle East. The United States strengthened its military presence and imposed sanctions aimed at limiting Iran's capabilities. Israel, on the other hand, focused on preventing Iran from gaining strategic advantage, especially in terms of military positioning and advanced weapons. This created a cycle. One move would trigger another. A strike would be followed by retaliation. A warning would be answered with another show of force. And slowly, the line between controlled tension and open conflict started to blur. Then came the turning point. A series of coordinated strikes, targeting key locations linked to Iran, changed the pace completely. These weren't isolated incidents. They were precise, deliberate, and significant enough to demand a response. And that response came quickly. Iran retaliated with missiles and drone attacks, not just in one location, but across multiple areas connected to US and Israeli interests. What made this different wasn't just the scale, it was the speed. The conflict was no longer contained. It was spreading. Within a short span of time, the situation escalated into a chain reaction. Military bases became targets. Strategic routes faced disruption. There were reports of attacks affecting shipping lanes and critical infrastructure. The risk was no longer limited to a single country. It began to affect the entire region. And that's where things became far more serious. Because this conflict doesn't exist in isolation. The Middle East is deeply interconnected. A strike in one area can trigger responses across borders. Alliances pull in additional players. Defensive actions can quickly turn into offensive ones. And when multiple countries are involved, directly or indirectly, the situation becomes unpredictable. Another factor that raised concern was the impact on global systems. Key oil routes pass through this region. Any disruption, even temporary, can affect global supply, prices, and economic stability. This means the consequences of this conflict aren't just regional, they're global. And yet, despite all this, there is still no clear direction. Some analysts believe this could stabilize, returning to a controlled state of tension. Others warn that a single miscalculation could push it into a much larger conflict. Because at this stage, it doesn't take much. One strike in the wrong place, one response that goes too far, one decision made under pressure, and everything changes. What makes this situation particularly complex is that each side is operating with its own objectives, its own red lines, and its own interpretation of what is justified. That means even when actions are intended as limited or strategic, they can be seen as escalations by the other side. And that's how conflicts grow, not always through intention, but through reaction. Right now, the world is watching a situation that is still unfolding. There are no clear answers, no confirmed outcomes, only possibilities, some of which are far more serious than others. And the uncertainty is what makes it dangerous. Because when there's no clear path forward, even small events can have large consequences. This conflict is still unfolding. There are no clear answers, no confirmed end, and no certainty about what happens next. What began as a series of calculated moves has now turned into a situation where even a single decision could change everything. So the real question is no longer just about what has happened so far. It's about what happens next. Will this stabilize? Or is this only the beginning of something much bigger? Let me know what you think. Because in situations like this, the line between control and chaos is thinner than it seems.